Hello, everyone. We are here to talk about how disordered eating impacts our skeletal health. So, if I were going to tweet out information for the masses that don't really want to get into the scientific nitty gritty of it, the tweet would read, disordered eating, real bad for your health and mine too, and everyone else's. So, if we want to get into some of the details of this and actually dive into the process that leads to skeletal issues and what those specific skeletal issues are, as well as where we can go in the field, please stick around. So up until this point, the majority of studies have been conducted on restrictive disordered eating and show a very, very, very strong link to skeletal damage, and that skeletal damage being long-term. And this is just a result of the reason those numbers are easier to see is a result of study design and focus. So there's been a lot of focus on teenage females and female athletes experiencing the female athlete triad. And actually one of the studies that conducted their own research that I'm presenting did a randomized control trial, and they focused on the hormonal impacts of bone mineral density. So what this showed is that disordered eating led to or is correlated to menstrual irregularity. They also found that a lower bone mineral density wasn't just present in the people that were previously thought, so like people who were super thin and not experiencing menses anymore. What this study showed us is that despite what these external symptoms that we can see are telling us, is that internally, people who may not be experiencing these symptoms, who are still experiencing disordered eating, are having negative effects on their skeleton because of this disordered eating, even though there's not really an outward symptom for us to see. And in more recent studies, they have expanded these study parameters and diversified the study populations a little bit more. And it actually shows that there are negative impacts on the skeleton in consumption-based eating disorders, or disordered eating, as well. And they are very strongly correlated to the mental and emotional stress that contributes to hormonal changes. Now, I know that is a huge mouthful. So let's talk about a couple other specific studies, and then we're going to break down very basically what the risks are, what causes these risks, and where we can go in the future. So another study that was conducted was to focus on the male athlete triad. And what this showed is that in sports emphasizing leanness and weight cuts and things like that, the males that participate in those are also at a higher risk for degraded bone health. And this is a result of energy deficiency within the skeletal microarchitecture. So basically, you're not taking in enough fuel, your body starts to eat itself because it has nowhere else to get that fuel from. So when our bodies don't store enough energy, we have to get it from somewhere. And in these particular cases, it comes from our bones in a very roundabout way. That's a gross oversimplification. But for the purposes of this video, that's what we're rolling with. There was another study. It was a cross-sectional longitudinal study of men and women where they had anthropometric measurements taken and also filled out questionnaires. And what it showed is that a decade later, people who were experiencing disordered eating were still experiencing psychological distress and hormonal changes that impacted bone health a decade later. Now, the fourth one that I haven't talked about yet was a cross-sectional study of women, and that focused on cortisol, bone mineral density, and anxiety and depression measures. And what it showed is that hypercortisolemia is a mediator of mood disruption and bone loss. So too much cortisol equals not enough bone mass, right? Okay, so I know that's all a little bit sciencey, so we're going to make it a little bit more clear. So the studies that have been conducted show that if there is some sort of mental or emotional disturbance, chronic stress, traumatic event, whatever it may be, and whether that is the eating disorder or the disordered eating pattern itself, or whether it is an additional mental health concern that either contributes to or is a result of disordered eating, what that shows is that no matter what order those things happen in, cortisol increases. And when cortisol increases, bone mineral density decreases. And our bone mineral density is it's what people go in and have tests for whenever they are concerned about osteoporosis. So when your bones aren't strong enough. So imagine I have dirt under my nails. That's disgusting. Imagine, okay, Red Rover. Did you ever play Red Rover as a kid? Now, obviously, holding like this, that's cheating. But linking of the hands, right? So imagine that this is what your bone matrix is supposed to look like. Okay, a healthy bone matrix, so when something pushes on it, it recovers, right? It pushes this way, it might hurt, but it recovers. Well, imagine playing Red Rover, where instead of being able to interlock your fingers, you have these super, super weak Velcro straps. And everybody gets like one, maybe two. So when somebody comes running through, whoop, straps break. Think of your bone matrix. So what the inside of your bones look like. Think of it as like a bunch of layers of Red Rover. And you're trying to protect yourself and not let the other team get through. The other team being anything and everything that could cause skeletal damage at this point. So if you're here, you're solid, you're strong, right? Well, if your bone matrix, the inside of your bone, if your bone matrix is like this and only attached with like some super weak Velcro straps, okay? Let's say your bone matrix looks like this now. It can break super easily. That's what we're trying to prevent. And that is one reason that the focus was on military members and athletes and younger females, is because those seemed to be the populations that were more adversely affected because of what they did. Well, it turns out this kind of thing can affect anyone. Some people are just more predisposed to the long-term negative skeletal effects of this. So what decreases is bone mass, your skeletal structure, what we just talked about, and your skeletal strength, because along with that structure, the strength is also decreased as well. Skeletal integrity, skeletal function, bone density, and this is all due to a decrease in hormones that are essential to bone remodeling. So within our bones, within that matrix, there are these little things that come and they clean up all the bad stuff, and these little things that come and produce more of the good stuff. That is a gross oversimplification of bone biology, but that's what we need to know for here. And what this eventually does is it increases risk of fracture, right? So if we're here, it doesn't fracture. It might hurt, right? But if we're here, fractures, cortical buckling, all kinds of other things. And this is oftentimes because of an increase in lack of energy, an increase in different types of hormones. It increases risk for osteoporosis and other types of bone diseases. But those last two, there's a correlation. However, the causation has not been identified just yet. More studies either should be, are, or need to be done in the future. But what we've learned from all of this is that overconsumption and undernutrition are oftentimes linked, and people don't always see the difference between the two. So initially when these studies started, the focus was on restrictive disordered eating. Now we're looking at consumption-based disordered eating as well, and the mental and emotional components that go in to determining how to treat those things. So in order to truly improve skeletal health, we have to get to the root cause of everything. So it's a chain reaction, and it doesn't matter what type of mental or emotional stress happens, it changes your hormones. And when your hormones change, your bones change. When your bones change, it impacts your entire health system musculoskeletally, and it can turn into just this snowball effect of injury and damage to the bones. Not as much is known right now about cartilage and the joint implications, specifically the cartilaginous pieces of the joints. But that was something that was suggested by all of these studies. And the thing that I really liked about all these studies is that all of them encouraged further research and even gave suggestions and ideas. And I think that, you know, doing interdisciplinary studies with anthropologists and examining the impacts of media, diet culture, military standards, weight class sports, consumerism and capitalism, and food access and food education is going to be a really great way to kind of break down what's happening and hopefully improve care for individuals who are experiencing disordered eating and therefore skeletal changes and detriments and impacts and all those things. And then being able to continue to broaden the definitions and expand the nuance behind the diagnostic criteria for disordered eating. The DSM-5 just updated several things not too long ago, and being able to apply this knowledge in a practical sense is what is going to allow us as nutritionists to help people understand, like, hey, those are, even if it's not a diagnosed pattern of disordered eating, it could simply be a not so helpful, beneficial, great relationship with food. It could simply be a person being malnutritious or over consuming in some sort of way. And if their relationship with food is altered, their intake of food will be altered. If their intake of food will be altered, so will their hormones. And when that happens, bone remodeling is also altered and overall skeletal health decreases. So as depressing as those results are, there's a lot of work that can be done and a lot of improvements that we can make in this area. There is a link at the bottom for my references page because it was way too much to put on the poster itself. If you have any questions, please reach out and let me know. Thanks so much for listening.